Welcome to the Superconscious Success Podcast, where Jen and her Superconscious Success family co-hosts bring you valuable content each and every week on topics relating to manifestation, spirituality, and most of all, using your superconscious to manifest success in all areas of your life. Now on to today's episode.
Hey there, Superconscious Success fan. Welcome back to another incredible interview. Now, I am so blessed to have on my show today the author of Energy Healing for Empaths. Now, being an empath myself and also, having my share of energy vampires around me, this is definitely an episode that I was really excited to talk about. Now, if you're an empath, you're struggling to set boundaries, maybe discover your own power amidst chaos, or even to overcome the energy drain from the vampires, then definitely listen up, because we're going to be talking to Lisa Campion. Now, I'll let Lisa tell you her story, but I'll tell you a little bit about her. She's the author of the #1 best-selling book, The Art of Psychic Reiki, as well as the book Energy Healing for Empaths. She's a psychic counselor and Reiki master teacher with over 25 years of experience. Lisa's been teaching Reiki for over 20 years and has trained over 1,000 people in Reiki and has done over 15,000 individual sessions. She's also the host of the radio show and podcast, The Miracle of Healing on Empower Radio. She specializes in training emerging psychics, empaths, and healers so that they can fully step into their gifts, since the world needs all the healers that it can get right now, especially in today's climate. So, hey, Lisa, how are you doing today?
I'm doing so well, Jennifer. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm excited to talk about this stuff.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I've been really looking forward to it, because I do think that at the moment, this is something that we really do need to talk about. And it's something that, when we can't actually manage our own emotions and our own energy, then it can really take a toll on our happiness and our well-being. So I'm looking forward to getting into this for our listeners. So before we do, please tell us your story and how you came to be talking about this topic.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I grew up, I was born in the 60s and I grew up in the 70s and 80s, just outside Boston, in a big old haunted house, and I was one of those sort of like I see dead people kids. I was very psychic, and was an empath too. But back in the day, there really was no podcasts like this. There were no psychics on TV, no books, no, nothing. It was a very different world. And I knew from an early standpoint that I needed to be kind of quiet about my gifts. If you see angels and talk to dead people, that doesn't normally, that go well. People think that you have a mental health issue, and it doesn't go well. So I knew even when I was really little, I remember telling myself I had to pretend to be normal in public, because I didn't want that to happen to me. And then I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what was going on, looking for books in the library, trying to understand the empath stuff as well as the psychic stuff, and really struggled a lot. I spent the first 20 years of my life trying to turn it off, figuring out how to turn it off. And then it was the 80s and it was the dawn of the new age. And all of a sudden there was a lot of information that I could have about, I worked with a shaman, there were books, I worked in a new age bookstore, and I got the training that I needed to really understand my gifts. And I had this funny moment when I was 17. I was just in university. It's like, going to a party at university, like on a Friday night, and I was feeling great. I was all happy. And I walked in to this party. It was a house party. And I sat next to this guy, and you know how the empath always finds the person who's the most miserable in any room, right? And he's like,
so we can fix them.
That's right. He's like crying into his beer. He's having the worst day ever. And he's like, and 5 minutes after sitting at him, I just felt terrible. I felt like this
Drained.
total horrible depression, suicidal depression, drained. I'm like, I've got to go. I've got to leave. What is wrong with me? Am I crazy? Am I just so I got up and I left. I was sweating. It was not pretty. And one of those life-changing moments that happened to me in that right there is something made me turn around and look in through the window, and I saw him sitting and crying. So on the same place, on the same couch, still crying into his beer. And all of a sudden I felt fine. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm myself again, right? And that in that moment, I realized it wasn't my stuff I was feeling. It wasn't me, that all that was him. It was his sadness, his depression, his anxiety. And I was suddenly fine. I was like, oh, it's not me. And that, I mean, this was 1982. There was not
a lot about it.
Still no word. That word empath didn't come around for 20 more years. But in that moment, I just understood, and I knew that I needed to protect myself. I knew that I needed to take steps so that I wouldn't be like that psychic sponge that just picked up everything.
Yeah.
And that's when I started working. That's when I started seeing clients.
Wow. And that's when the Reiki and that came into it as well.
Yeah, well, the Reiki came later. So I started actually working as a psychic when I was 19. I don't know why I did. You think you can do stuff when you're 19.
Yeah. We think we can do anything at that age.
I know. I'm like, oh, sure, I can do that. No problem. And then I quickly I understood that I needed more skills. So I went back to school and I studied counseling and psychology. And for a long time, I became a therapist. So for a long time, I combined therapy with psychic. That was really a great combination. And then about 20 years ago, a little over 22 years now, I learned Reiki and then added that into my mix. But these days, my real joy is to train other people, to help people that are understanding that they're an empath, or feeling the calling to be a healer, or going through a psychic opening. And people, there's a lot of fear and pain and suffering around those things. If we don't have help, if we don't I don't want anybody to have to do it the hard way like I did.
No,
you know what I mean?
And I know exactly what you're talking about, Lisa, because there have been many times in my life, a couple in particular, where the same things happened to me that happened to you when you were 17. And I'm actually a naturopath and a remedial massage therapist. Right. And so I remember multiple times going into those massage rooms and coming out completely drained. And because when people go in to get a massage, obviously they want to offload everything. They want to offload all that energy. They want to offload their problems and they want to talk. And so I would come out drained. And I was working alongside another massage therapist, and I explained it to him. And I said, I don't know why I'm coming out feeling like this. This is before I knew that I was an empath and this is what was happening. And he said, you have to protect your energy when you're in the massage rooms, because what they will do is they'll lie there and unconsciously, obviously, they're going to start to take your energy. And so I started to put like a bubble around myself, and I started to protect myself with this bubble so that I didn't absorb all of their energy. I could still listen to them and interact with them, but I didn't come out feeling like I literally felt like I could sleep for a week. It was exhausting. And so I think that's the thing. When you're an empath, if you don't recognize it, you can be around certain people and it just drains you. It just completely floors you. And we're going to get into this in this episode, because it's important that we understand how we do protect ourselves from these energies. And I know there's been a time when I've been at a family event, and all of a sudden, I don't know what happened, but the energy in the room just changed, and people started talking negative, and it was Christmas, actually, it was Christmas Day. People started talking negative and started being, I don't know, the energy just completely shifted. And I remember I had to actually leave. And I actually had to go out to the car and sit in the car by myself for 10 or 15 minutes to recalibrate myself. Thankfully my husband knows by now, and if I take off, if we're at a party and I've taken off, he knows exactly what's happened, because I'm an introvert too, so I absorb all of that. And so it's kind of it's interesting that once you actually recognize this, you can actually start to look after yourself and put things into place that are going to help you to manage that energy. So before we get into all that, for those that don't know, what is an empath?
So an empath is back in the 90s, this psychologist Eileen Aron, she coined the term the highly sensitive person.
Mhm.
And I love that. That's sort of like when we started thinking about that there's sort of a different type of person that's very highly sensitive. And I think the highly sensitive person is slightly different from the empath. She really has it as a nervous system. So what's sensitive is our nervous system. And a lot of
Right.
times the HSP are highly creative people. They have sensory integration problems. They can be very emotional and sensitive to people's emotions, but it's more of a nervous system issue. And empath is slightly different. The highly sensitive people are usually creatives. They're like artists or writers, or they're highly creative. And empath is more like a healer, same type of person. And sometimes people really relate to both, like, well, I think I have a little bit of both characteristics. But an empath is a person who literally feels with our feelings, and in our body what other people are feeling. So we're like a big psychic sponge, and we absorb the energy, emotions, and thoughts, even and physical sensations of other people, and we experience those things as if it's happening to us. Like you in the massage therapy room, it's going to be a lot more intense if you have your hands on people. That's it like amps up the intensity of our ability to absorb. And until we figure it out, it feels like a great big curse, a gift we wish we could throw back. When we do figure out how to manage our energy, what it really is the gift of the healer, because those things are like having a built-in MRI and X-ray machine for a healer. So you were a massage therapist, you work as a healer, and what can happen then is that those things will give you information about what's going on with your clients. Sorry,
We've got a visitor.
My cat's she just comes to visit for every Zoom call I'm ever on. So
that's so good.
So that that's really what it's for. It's for this, we tend to be helpers, healers, caretakers. We tend to want to be of service, even though we're introverted and we're not quite sure we like people, actually, but we're called to be of service to humanity. And those things help us understand what's happening for somebody, even if they can't explain it. Like, you can tell what's going on with your cat. They can't communicate, but an empath can feel what the cat's feeling, thinking, needing, what if there's pain in the body, right? And if you're working on children, or whoever just doesn't always know, even perfectly grown perfect adults don't always know what's happening inside of them, but we feel it, right? That's really what it is.
And what's interesting is that what people don't understand is that when we do absorb other people's energies, and when we do take all of that upon ourselves, then this can actually lead to not only emotional distress and psychological distress and a whole heap of things, but also physical issues. So I know myself, before I realized this and I started to protect myself, I actually ended up getting extreme adrenal burnout, and I ended up with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So autoimmune thyroid disease. And so then at that point I had to give up the massage because it was just taking on too much energy for me, and go into recuperation mode. So how does the impact of energy have on our physical well-being?
Wow. Well, Jennifer, I'm so sorry to hear that happened to you. The same thing happened to me, pretty much exactly. So it can make us quite ill until we learn how to, really handle this energetic overload. But here's my theory about it, is that we have 5 filtering organs in our body, and that we learn how to run this excess energy through our gut, or our bladder, kidney, liver, gallbladder, lungs, and skin. Usually we have one of those things where we run all this energy. Your liver is a filtering organ, right? So it's your gut is a filtering organ. We can learn how to filter all this excess stuff through there. But it's like, if we're a sponge and we absorb all this goo, and we don't know how to, which I call client goo. If you're working on a massage person, it's client goo, right? And you absorb all that client goo, and you don't know how to clear it. You're stuck with all this negativity that can make you quite ill. and
Yeah.
exhausted, you know. And the other thing about a sponge is not only does it absorb, but it also leaks. So empaths tend to have pretty leaky energy, and that can give us exhaustion, fatigue, you know.
And
And
because
if you,
it's almost immediate, isn't it? You come into the vicinity of somebody that may be cluster B personalities, they may be,
yes,
you know, narcissistic disorder, they may be
yep,
you know, energy vampires, all sorts of different different character traits, as we call it. There's so, but the moment that you actually come into contact, the moment you're actually in their vicinity, you can feel exhausted, and you can even just think about this person and feel exhausted. So is
yeah,
it like that quickly that we can just totally,
absolutely.
yeah.
And it seems to be physical proximity. So if you
Mm,
sit next to somebody you don't know for 6 hours on an airplane, you
yeah.
know, even if you have never speak to them and you don't know anything about them, like it can still happen.
Yep.
Or it's like our people that are close in our lives, your mother-in-law, your boss at work, like your children, whoever is in your, if we have like, you know, just spending a lot of time with them, that can happen too, where we just get drained. And what happens is, especially with the energy vampires, is they form energetic cords with us.
Yeah.
And those are like energetic connections that persist when we're not even in the room with them, you know. And that can really take a toll. We're quite sensitive to those because we don't have very good natural boundaries, and we really care, we're really kind, we want to help people, we really
And we
feel people's
think,
pain.
yeah, and I
We can
think that
help
as
them.
an
It's like, I'll
empath,
just take all that from you and you're going to feel better. And then it works. And then we keep doing it.
and that's the thing. And I think that as empaths, we're just natural nurturers. We're just, we just believe that everybody's good and everybody's amazing.
Yes.
Everybody's got their own path, and we can help everyone. We can fix everybody. But in reality, we can't. And we have to put ourselves as number one, because if we don't have the energy to feed it, to be able to put out and to heal people. So it's very, yeah, we tend to be overgivers as empaths. So you were talking about the energy cord and how, you know, if you're around somebody for a long period of time, like you said, like your family or very close friends, parents, children, if you're around those people and they've created this energy cord, how do we go about severing that energy cord so that we don't have those connections?
Right. There's really two ways we do it. And the easiest way is to do kind of like a energy cord clearing. And you can just imagine that, you know, you ask your angels to come in and sever the connection. I know people who do it with a crystal, like you kind of take a crystal and you like cut, you know, run it through your energy field like that. You can do it in a guided meditation, just like disconnect it. And then we also have to do the harder work of coming out of codependency in our relationships with those people. And that might mean actually saying no, setting a boundary, like dealing with a relationship on the ground, you know, person to person. And what I notice is that if we do the energetic part first, it often kind of gives us a leg to stand on, so that the you know, I think cord cutting should be and can be part of our daily energy management. You know, it's like psychic hygiene. Like you brush your teeth, you cut the cords, you know, like you wash your hair, you ditch the energy you picked up from other people and you put yourself back in your bubble. And there's certain steps that we do on a daily basis. I do them several times a day. I do them between clients. I do them before and after I go into a big store. Like these big box stores are very challenging environments for empaths. We, you know, like I get halfway through Costco or a place like that, and I'm like,
I don't even try going into Costco.
I don't know who I am. I can't remember when I lost my car in the parking lot. You know, like I've like ditched my shopping cart in the middle of Costco because I just had I'm like empathic overload panic attack, you know. So before and after, like if you do it before you go in and after you come out and halfway through, that these practices strengthen our boundary over time. So we're like weightlifting, you go to the gym, you lift weights, you get stronger over time. And we can do that with literally our energy field. And that gives us the strength to do the harder thing, which is to actually deal with the person in real time.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, if it's somebody that you can actually cut ties with, I think it's a lot easier. But if it's somebody that you're in a close relationship with, like you said, it takes a lot of work, because it takes the healing from the codependency. It takes the setting boundaries. And as empaths, we're not good at setting boundaries.
Yeah.
Because we believe that, you know, everything's going to be all right, and you know they don't mean anything by it. It feels
so mean. It feels so mean to set a boundary. To say no and set a boundary, you know. And for other people, they're like, whatever, you know, like it's no big deal. But for us, it's like, oh, it's so mean. I said no, you know. And it's like, then we have to go have a lie down, right? You know? Yeah,
exactly. It just takes it out of you. But it is really, really important that it's something that the empath learns. And if you can't say no, then say, look, I'll think about it, you know, or leave it with me. Yep, leave it with me. And the unfortunate thing is that sometimes when you're dealing with, as I said, cluster B or energy vampires, they can often not take no very well. So because they're trying to absorb your energy, and they're trying to you know, to fill their own cup with your energy. And so when you say no, it's like saying, no, sorry, but you fill your own cup, I'm filling my own cup. And so they can often not take it too well. But it is important as an empath that we do that for our own well-being and for our own energy. So you were talking a minute ago about empath overload, and I have experienced it. Go a little bit into, for the empaths out there, a little bit into what empath overload is.
Yeah, so it's this moment, like if we're a sponge and we're not protecting ourselves, empath overload is the minute your sponge is full. Yeah. You know, when that sponge is full. And we experience it as anxiety. Most people sort of leave their body. They get sort of dissociated, like you pop out of your body and you're spacey. That's why I can't find my car in the parking lot. You know what I mean? I'm like, what? What color is my car? Like, where is it? What planet am I on? You know? And then we can have a headache. We can get cranky, irritable, stomach aches. You know, my kids who are all empaths will come home from school like that. You know, and they just be a mess. And you know, and so it's sort of a combination of emotional and physical symptoms that can be quite unpleasant. And I'm sure empaths who's listening knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's like that moment you have to leave the party and go sit in your car is because you hit empathic overload.
Yeah, absolutely. It was just like almost like my head was about to explode. Right. I'm like, look, I can't sit here any longer. This is just getting too much. And my husband, he was just like, okay, it's gotten a bit much for us. So and it just takes 10 or 15 minutes and recentering and regrounding and you know, like you said, cutting the cords and resetting,
dumping all that negativity you picked up out of your body, clearing yourself. So I sort of have a process for that, which is kind of the cure for this, and that's recentering. So that's coming back home to yourself, and grounding, which is being back in your body. And centering and grounding tend to take out the dissociation. Like if you just like left the building, you know, like you've left yourself and you're flying around the parking lot somewhere, you know, then the recentering and grounding bring us back in. Then we need to clear the energy that we picked up. I use like a breathing down my spine and out the bottoms of my feet and into the earth to release that. And simultaneously pulling in light, that's refilling and replacing our lost energy. And then sort of the icing on the cake is the bubble that you talked about already. So protecting, so being inside the bubble. And those things now, like I have it down to, I can do it in a few breaths and with my intention. And I do it like, you know, as needed. And also before I go to bed at night, because I don't sleep very well if I don't.
It does. It totally affects your sleep. And we were speaking before about how, as an empath, we can sometimes take on other people's stuff as our own. Now, how do we distinguish between what's theirs and what is ours?
such a great question. And it's a key question, Jennifer. So thank you for asking that. And I think that it's a simple question. Is this mine?
Mm-hmm.
So when I feel something, I start asking, is it mine? Whose is it?
Yeah.
And if I've been in touch with myself, I know that it's mine. Like, you know, and one of the challenging things for empaths is that we really need a daily way to manage and process our emotions. We need to journal, we need to meditate, we need to do something to handle our emotions on the daily. And if you're doing that, it's really obvious if it's yours or not yours. You know,
yeah.
Your body will tell you, your intuitive sense will tell you, your emotional self will tell you. If it's not, if it's not yours, you flush it down the grounding cord and release it. If it is yours, then you need to attend to it with loving care and attention, like we attend to our feelings,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is why it's so important. Super conscious success is about us connecting to our higher self. It's about us connecting to source and being able to recognize who we are as souls, who we are as who we really are before we were put down on this earth. So It is important that we do learn to connect with that higher self, to connect with that part of us that only looks for the good. And so this is where intuition comes in. This is where getting in touch with our inner being comes in. This is where healing our inner child comes in. So for people that maybe are not that connected, because, our world's busy. Our world is noisy. There is so much noise in our world at the moment that I think that people don't take the time to sit down and just listen. They just, the amount of people, I was talking to somebody the other day and I was saying, the amount of people that need to have noise around them all the time in order to feel centered, in order to feel like, I don't know whether it's because they're scared of their thoughts or whether it's just, they're one of these people that just like, I've always liked quiet.
Me too.
So I've always liked to be able to just sit in a room and just, even when I'm in the car driving, I very rarely will have music on. My husband's the opposite. He'll get into the car and music's blaring. But it's interesting. And I do think what you just said, I think it's really important for people to, figure out a way that you can connect with that self, and then you will know what's yours and what's somebody else's.
If you don't know what's yours, if you don't know yourself, how are you going to know what's yours and what's not yours? And when you do know yourself, you do. Like, it's just, if you ask that question, and I think that's a question that also it's a matter of discernment, really, and when you continue to practice that, it gets easier over time.
Absolutely.
To give that discernment.
Absolutely.
So I know instantly, if it's mine or somebody else's at this point,
on the side.
Because I'm just so aware of what's going on inside myself most of the time.
And you can also, I think if you really look into it and you go, okay, well, I was feeling fine before I was around this person. All of a sudden, I'm now like exhausted and distressed and, negative energy. Then you can kind of discern that it's most likely not your stuff.
Right.
It's most likely the other energies that are being put on top of you. So now I wanted to talk to you a little bit about old soul empaths. So I have always seen myself as a bit of an old soul, and I see myself as being connected because throughout my life, I've been connected to different energy vampires, and we all do. I think every single one of us is connected to some at some time.
We're like a magnet. We're like a magnet. They just come around. Like if you
Exactly.
one, 10 miles away, it's gonna find you.
Yeah. Like, if you're an empath, you've got it. You've got many in your life. But
yes.
I believe that everyone that comes into our life for a purpose. Yes. And I believe every person that comes into our life comes into it to help us learn, to help us to grow, to help us to expand as a soul. You talked in your book about an old soul empath. Can you just go into that just a little bit for me? And
Sure.
how we may know if we are one?
Well, I want to say if you're an empath, you're an old soul, pretty much. And I see this. This is just like my own metaphysical belief. I don't know if it's really true. It's just my current working theory.
Yeah.
But I find that we gain empath status, nature, attitude as we go through our lifetimes. So we maybe new souls are kind of more like that cluster B person you're talking about. They don't have much empathy. They're just kind of crashing around looking, power, sex, and money, trying to accumulate those things. We go into middle soul time. It's very painful middle soul because it's a lot about dealing with the karmic consequences of our bad behavior in our new soul days, and we learn really compassion through suffering in our middle soul days. And then as old soul, we're really we've learned compassion, we've become empathic, we always think about how other people feel, and now the thrust of our life is about service to humanity. How can we help? How can we serve? How can we help other people? And so there's a polarization going on here between the new soul energy vampires and the old soul empaths. And whenever you get a polarized, things like that, then we have potential to learn and grow. And I think that our potential is to learn boundaries. They often come around to give us sort of that friction. It's like going 5 rounds in a boxing ring, like, oh, you got one in on me. Okay. Like, so we learn boundaries.
That's what I've found. It's really been about teaching me about my own power, to tell you the truth. It's about teaching me about, okay, you know what? I am a strong person. I can do this, and I think that that's the thing. It's a little learning lesson, but it's one that's really, really important, because I think that
so important.
I think that empaths can lose that sense of self if they're not careful. They can lose that sense of who am I, especially if you are absorbing the energy vampires. So
exactly. And they have a stake in that's sort of like, that's what they want us to do now. And what they have is the opportunity to heal, because we're like, they take a step towards us, become more empathic. We take a step towards them and become more boundaried and strong. And everyone, comes towards the middle, which is more healthy. So I think that's the potential. It doesn't always happen that way. And sometimes we just have to do a little spiritual kung fu and set the boundary.
Yeah, because if we don't, then what we tend to do is we tend to go down towards their vibrations and their energy, and it will drain us. And it is of absolutely no purpose to them whatsoever, because it doesn't, like, as empaths, we're the light. We are there to shed the light. We're there to help, as you said, heal humanity. And so if we allow ourselves to be absorbed by those energies, we don't have the capacity to do that. So it is important that we start to, put all of these practices into place that we've spoken about today. And I did want to ask you too, I've done a lot of reading on empaths throughout my years. And I do know that something that is pretty common amongst empaths too is addictions. Now, whether that's, alcohol addictions, whether that's drug addictions, whether that's even addictions to food or sugar or whatever it is, why is it that empaths are so prone to addictions? Is it because they're trying to numb themselves? They're trying to stop all of that flooding of negative energy coming in. They don't want to think their thoughts. Why is it that they're prone to addictions?
I think you answered that pretty well. There's a couple of reasons. I think that there's the numbing, because we don't, and this is why I think learning how to manage our own emotions is key. So we're super emotional ourselves. We're very prone not only to addiction, but anxiety and depression. Anxiety comes from being poorly boundaried. Depression often comes from not knowing how to fulfill our life purpose, because if we're here to serve, but serving puts us in the line of fire somehow, we often don't do it. And so, and addiction sort of like, it's like depression, anxiety, and addiction. It's like the trifecta of disturbance, a mental and emotional disturbance for empaths. But I think we're just trying to stop feeling other people's feelings, stop feeling our own feelings. And I noticed a strong connection with smoking and empaths. And it's so interesting to me, because what do you do when you want to leave the party? You go out for a cigarette. It gives you an excuse
the
to
psychological
leave the building.
thing.
And then you stand by yourself outside where there's no other people, and you blow cigarette smoke through your energy field, which is basically the same thing as taking a sage and blowing it.
I never thought of it like that. Wow.
Right.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
then you take a huge breath. And then, so you start breathing, right? And there's like all this benefit that
Yeah.
happens for that. And I'm not advocating smoking by any means, but I understand why people do it. And I
Yeah.
think when we learn these fundamental energy management, you can accomplish the same thing without the cigarette, once you're
Yeah.
aware that that's what you really need. And I think
Yeah.
what if you have an addiction, like look at what it is you're trying, what need is it fulfilling in you, and then try to find an alternate way to get that need met.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I want to finish up our call. Like I said to you, I could talk to you for hours about this, because there is so much that we can learn as empaths. And there is so much that if we start to recognize that being an empath, as you said, it's not a curse. We've often thought of being an empath as a curse because it's uncomfortable at times, and it's, it can really affect, like you said, physical health, emotional health, if you don't get it in check. And so I think that, if you start to see it as an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to be able to learn how you can heal, not just yourself, but heal others, because, we can be the shining light. But unfortunately, as an empath, we are often the target of narcissists, of the energy vampires we're talking about, the cluster bees. Can you let us know what these particular terms mean? How do we go about dealing with these sort of energies? Like, what are the steps that we can take right now if we're in that particular situation?
Yeah, I talk in my book about 3 or 4 different types of energy vampire.
Mm-hmm.
And the cluster Bs are the real extreme personality disorder type, narcissistic, psychopathic kinds of people. And if you do have one of those, it's just important to get away. There's no possible really reforming them. It's not going to work to drag them to therapy, mostly because they don't see that there's anything wrong with them. They're perfect, and you're clearly the problem. And they're rather remorseless. Once you stop feeding them, they just find another victim. They're like, okay, I'm done with you, and they move on. If you have had an encounter like that, you probably need help. It's like getting run over, and you might need some recovery help after if you've had one, if you've been married to one, or you've had one as a boss or something, you're going to need some help with that. And there's the victim type too. The victim type is more common. That's the friend who calls you and just talks about the same thing for an hour every they never want to change, they never want to do it. They're just like absorbing energy. They just like to complain, and often end up making worse decisions. They make the one decision that's going to make their situation worse, And with those people, it's more about limiting your time. I mean, you might just walk away, but you might just I'm only going to talk to that person once every 3 months, or once for 5 minutes, or so, it's again, the boundary, like, what are you willing to give? And the most important, the most single quickest way to tell is if you feel the feeling of resentment. So you could do like a little inventory in your mind about all the people you feel resentful about in your life, and whoever shows up on that is an indicator they might be an energy vampire, or it's whoever it is. It's a person that you need to set a better boundary. You need to back up and reset your boundary, because resentment is a red flag that we're just giving more than we're receiving back in a relationship.
Absolutely. Wow, that's fantastic. So I think with everything that we've spoken about today, Lisa, I think that the empaths out there can start to recognize that it can actually be a great thing if we learn to protect ourselves, learn to put that bubble around ourselves, learn to break that energetic cord. Yeah, absolutely.
Think about it. If empaths were in charge of the world, we'd have so few of the problems we have now. People wouldn't be hungry or in pain. Like, we would do something about it,
That's
it's a beautiful
true.
thing.
That's true. And we wouldn't have any of the issues of the energies, would we? Because we'd all be empaths. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. Is there anything else you want to say on the podcast about this particular topic? Make sure that you go and get her book, Energy Healing for Empaths. That's available on Amazon, isn't it?
Amazon, yeah. And also on my website, I have a free 4-hour video class for that.
Nice.
Yeah, that brings up a lot of these topics and leads you through the meditations and the practices of boundary setting and energy management. So visit my website and you can get a free class.
Wonderful. And so,
yeah.
so your website, what's the website?
LisaCampion.com.
Yep. Easy to remember. Fantastic. You're in the middle of writing a new book, and you've also got the book on Reiki, if you're interested in learning about Reiki, which is another wonderful energy modality which can really help the empaths out there. So, and as Lisa said before, she does actually help those that are empaths, they're wanting to help other people, then definitely get in touch with her. So thank you so much for being with me today, Lisa.
Oh, Jennifer, thank you so much for having me.
And I'll make sure that I put all of that in the show notes so that people can get in touch with you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.